Level 1. The Wrong Man. Christian Poulsen. Before Liverpool, the CV was genuinely impressive. Back-to-back Danish Player of the Year in 2005 and 2006. A UEFA Cup at Sevilla, where Marca named him the best acquisition in Spanish football that summer. 92 international caps. Schalke, Sevilla, Juventus. The man had operated at the highest level of European football across 4 different leagues. When Roy Hodgson signed him for £4.5 million in August 2010, the investment thesis was straightforward. Replace Javier Mascherano with someone who'd been performing at a similar level in Serie A. The return on that investment was catastrophic. His own teammate Daniel Agger told the press Poulsen would have to stop drinking café lattes like he did in Italy. 12 Premier League appearances. Slow, passive, consistently outrun by other midfielders. When Dalglish replaced Hodgson, Poulsen's market value essentially went to zero. Gone within a year to newly promoted French side Evian. A player who'd been Marca's signing of the season 3 years earlier couldn't get on the pitch at Liverpool. A career that declined faster than anyone predicted. Eric Dyer. 49 England caps. A decade at Tottenham. And a career-long identity crisis between centre-back and defensive midfielder that never resolved. When Pochettino first moved him into midfield in 2015, the early performance metrics looked fine. The energy was there, and Spurs had enough quality around him. Against technical, quick-passing midfields, every cognitive limitation surfaced. Slow processing on the turn, poor decision-making under sustained pressure, a passing range that never extended beyond safe. Dyer at centre-back could read the game and commit to challenges. Dyer in midfield was a security guard who knew where the doors were but couldn't lock any of them. Level 2. The Functional Passenger. The players at Level 2 are genuinely great footballers sitting in the wrong chair. Both had the technical quality to operate deep. Both had the vision. Neither could resist the urge to do the fun part of the job and ignore the boring part. Paul Pogba. World Cup winner. 4-time Serie A champion. One of the most naturally gifted midfielders of his generation. And an absolute liability as a holding midfielder. At Juventus, the system protected him. Pirlo managed the tactical architecture. Vidal covered the defensive workload, and Pogba was free to carry forward, play those raking diagonals, and arrive late in the box. When managers asked him to anchor, the same patterns kept repeating. He'd drift forward out of habit. He'd overcommit to a challenge and leave the entire defensive structure exposed behind him. France won the 2018 World Cup, with Kanté essentially functioning as Pogba's insurance policy, absorbing every defensive responsibility so Pogba could focus purely on creation. At United, Mourinho tried him deeper. So did Solskjaer. That 6'3" frame shielding possession was phenomenal. Defenders bounced off him like he had his own gravitational field. The distribution was elite level, but the role demands discipline off the ball. And Pogba, without possession, had the positional awareness of a kid at a buffet, always wandering toward the thing that looked most exciting. Jack Wilshere. After watching the 19-year-old dominate a full season as Arsenal's box-to-box engine, Fabio Capello publicly declared he wanted Wilshere in the holding role for England. The strategic logic made sense on paper. The technical quality was clearly there. But it was a repositioning, not a like-for-like transition of what Wilshere actually did at club level. At Arsenal, Alex Song did the anchoring. Wilshere was the player between Song and Fabregas, carrying the ball, pressing forward, doing the glamorous version of the defensive work. Drop him into the pure 6 for England, and those same attacking instincts became liabilities. He'd carry forward when the job was to recycle. He'd press aggressively and leave the centre-backs completely exposed. The injuries that ended his career are the headline. Retired at 30. But the holding midfield experiment failed independently of those issues. Like Pogba, he needed a partner to handle the unglamorous work behind him. The talent was level 6. The discipline was level 2. Level 3. The Shield. This is where it stops making sense to casual fans. The 3 players at level 3 have more combined trophies than most players at level 6 and 7. The position is literally named after one of them. But this list measures the range of what you bring to the role, not just how well you do one part of it. Level 3 players won the ball, gave it to someone better, and that was the job. They did it so well, they became essential to the greatest teams of their era. Level 7 impact, Level 3 attributes. Claude Makelele. The defensive midfield position is sometimes called the Makelele role. At Real Madrid, he operated behind Zidane, Figo, Raúl and Ronaldo. 3 Ballon d'Or winners between them, and did the work that allowed all of them to attack freely. When Madrid sold him to Chelsea in 2003, Florentino Perez said he wouldn't be missed because he rarely passed the ball more than 3 meters. Zidane's response at the time, when they brought in David Beckham as a superstar signing: "Why put another layer of gold paint on the Bentley when you're losing the engine?" Chelsea's 2004-2005 title winners conceded 15 Premier League goals, a record low. Makelele was the foundation. Mourinho called him Player of the Season. 144 Premier League appearances, 4 assists, 0 big chances created. Creation was never the brief. Winning the ball and feeding Lampard was. Nobody in the world executed that better. Gennaro Gattuso. If Makelele was surgical, Gattuso was a controlled detonation. Milan's midfield from 2003 to 2012 ran on one arrangement. Pirlo dictates, Gattuso destroys. 3 Champions League finals, 2 Champions League titles. Everything about his game was psychological warfare. The pressing, the tackling, the relentless aggression that sat in your head for 90 minutes before you even received the ball. On the ball, functional at best. Short, safe, move it on. Elite at one half of the job, completely ignoring the other. N'Golo Kante. The hardest placement on this list to defend and the most important. 2 Premier League titles, Leicester and Chelsea. A World Cup. Champions League Player of the Final in 2021, and he's at level 3. Kante's genius was interception, pressing, and ball recovery. He covered more ground than anyone in Europe's top 5 leagues. He materialized in passing lanes opponents thought were empty. Then he won it and moved it on. To Mahrez and Vardy at Leicester, to Hazard at Chelsea, to Pogba and Griezmann for France. The passing range stayed limited throughout his career. Creative output from deep was minimal. Makelele had the position named after him. Kante had a joke that the earth is 70% water and the rest is covered by him. Same archetype, same level. The greatest shields football has produced. Level 4. The controller. The difference between level 3 and level 4 is what happens after the ball is won. Level 3 recycles to someone better. Level 4 decides what happens next. Nemanja Matic at Chelsea. Mourinho's midfield anchor in 2014-15. Dominant physically, composed enough to progress play. A title winner who declined sharply after 30. Fabinho at his Liverpool peak between 2018 and 2020. Klopp's pressing system depended on him winning the battle. Champions League, Premier League, Club World Cup. When he was fit, Liverpool looked like a different side entirely. Javier Mascherano. At Liverpool, pure destruction. A 5'9" Argentinian who tackled like the opposition having possession was a personal insult. At Barcelona, Guardiola moved him to centre-back, asked him to build from the back, and Mascherano adapted completely. Same aggression, now combined with the tactical intelligence to read build-up, step into midfield, and distribute under pressure. A World Cup finalist in 2014, making the last-ditch sliding tackle on Robben in the 99th minute of the semi-final against the Netherlands that kept Argentina alive. The evolution from pure destroyer to ball-playing hybrid is what separates him from the level below. Patrick Vieira. 6'4", impossibly long stride, carrying the ball through central midfield at a pace that wingers would struggle to match. The Invincibles in 2003-2004 don't happen without him. 3 Premier League titles, one of them unbeaten. Vieira at his peak was moving forward, driving past midfielders, using that frame to overwhelm anyone who tried to stop the momentum. Roy Keane. Everyone remembers the confrontations with Vieira, the tunnel at Highbury, the stare. What gets overlooked is how technically proficient Keane was in possession. He drove forward with timing and purpose, arriving in the penalty area to score goals that holding midfielders have no business scoring. The performance against Juventus in the 1999 Champions League semi-final, already booked, knowing he'd missed the final, still commanding the entire match, remains the greatest individual midfield display in that competition's history. 7 Premier League titles. The debate over Keane or Vieira will outlive both of them. They're at the same level for the same reason. Both brought more than destruction, neither brought everything. Level 5. The anchor. The players at this level don't just win the ball and give it on, they control the tempo of the entire match from the base of midfield. Every system they play in is built around their ability to receive under pressure, distribute with precision, and maintain structural order for 90 minutes. Michael Carrick. This placement will start arguments. Carrick above Keane. Carrick above Vieira. Carrick above Kante. United fans have spent a decade calling him underrated. Everyone else thinks he was a passenger in great squads. The truth favours Carrick more than people want to admit. The metronome of Ferguson's later title-winning sides, 464 appearances, 5 Premier League titles, a Champions League. Passing accuracy from deep consistently among the highest in the division. Rarely tackled because he read the game well enough to intercept instead. Rarely carried the ball because the first-time pass was always quicker. When Carrick played, United controlled matches. When he didn't, the midfield became chaotic. The player opponents noticed least and teammates valued most. Thiago Alcantara. At Bayern under Guardiola, the deep-lying conductor who made positional play function. Capable of receiving under intense pressure, turning in half spaces that barely existed, and delivering line-breaking passes that started attacks 3 moves before anyone else had processed the situation. Bayern's build-up ran through him even when opponents specifically targeted him with their pressing triggers. 7 consecutive Bundesliga titles, 2 Champions League titles. At Liverpool, the control was unmistakable when he played. One of the most technically gifted deep-lying midfielders of his generation, undermined by a body that couldn't sustain what the brain demanded. Joshua Kimmich. Right back at the highest level, transitioned into midfield, became one of the most complete holding midfielders in world football. Multiple Bundesliga titles, a Champions League. Bayern's tactical structure depends on his presence at the base. When Kimmich sits deep, the fullbacks push high, the wingers hold width, and the attacking shape relies on his distribution to function. Remove him, and the coherence disappears. Level 6. The complete. Casemiro. 5 Champions League titles. The holding midfielder in the most decorated midfield trio of the 21st century, alongside Kroos and Modric. The criticism, that he only looked good because of the company. The reality, Kroos and Modric only had creative freedom because Casemiro absorbed every defensive responsibility behind them. What elevates him beyond level 3 is the decisive output. Clutch goals in knockout rounds with the timing of a striker. Headers in semi-finals. Volleys in quarter-finals. The kind of contributions that shift momentum when Madrid and Manchester United were behind and needed somebody to change the trajectory. At United, when the legs slowed and the club was in free fall, people wrote him off. He adjusted his game, found ways to contribute when the physical tools diminished. The mentality never wavered. Rodri. The 2024 Ballon d'Or. City's treble season. And then the definitive proof. When Rodri tore his ACL in September 2024, City went from the most dominant force in English football to losing 4 consecutive matches for the first time under Guardiola, surrendering the title before the turn of the year, and finishing the season without a trophy for the first time since 2017. No single injury in Premier League history has demonstrated one player's value so starkly. Rodri's game is tempo management, receiving between the lines, absorbing the press, transitioning defense into attack so cleanly it looks effortless. The fact that Guardiola's system, built by the greatest tactical mind in the sport's history, collapsed without one midfielder tells you where Rodri belongs. Xabi Alonso. The passing range from deep operated on a different frequency to anyone else. At Liverpool, he could switch the point of attack from touchline to touchline without the ball leaving the ground. The 2005 Champions League final, down 3-0 at half-time. The greatest comeback the competition has produced, Alonso scored the equalizer. At Real Madrid, he provided the platform for the counter-attacking system behind Ronaldo, Benzema and Bale. A World Cup, a European Championship, Champions League titles with 2 different clubs. His managerial career, an unbeaten Bundesliga title with Leverkusen, then Real Madrid, confirms the cognitive level he operated at as a player. Toni Kroos. The argument against, not a defensive midfielder. The argument for. At Real Madrid under Ancelotti, he occupied the deepest midfield position in a 4-3-3 and controlled every match from there. Passing accuracy consistently above 90% in the Champions League. Rarely needed to tackle because the spatial awareness was precise enough that opponents couldn't access the zones around him. 6 Champions League titles. Retired after the 2024 final on his own terms. Whether he was a 6 or an 8 is a classification debate. The trophy cabinet doesn't care about classifications. Level 6, where the defensive midfielder stops being defined by what he prevents and starts being defined by what he creates. Every player here could destroy. Every player here could also win you the match with a pass or a goal. Level 7. The blueprint. This is where the position itself changed. Level 7 isn't about being the best defensive midfielder of a generation. It's about being the reason the next generation understood the role differently. Andrea Pirlo. Before Pirlo, the regista was a theoretical concept in Italian tactical philosophy. A deep-lying playmaker who controlled tempo through passing and spatial awareness, rather than physical dominance. Nobody had executed it at the highest level so completely. At Milan and then Juventus, he operated in front of the defense and delivered passes that nobody else on the pitch had identified as options. The free kicks, the through balls over the top. A World Cup in 2006 where he was named Man of the Match 3 times and won the Bronze Ball as one of the tournament's outstanding performers. 4 Serie A titles at Juventus where the entire system existed to get the ball to Pirlo and let him orchestrate. He proved a holding midfielder could control a match without ever needing to tackle. The only requirement was processing the game faster than everyone else. Paul Scholes. The most controversial placement on this list, and deliberately so. Scholes never played as a defensive midfielder in the traditional sense. For most of his career, he was ahead of the pivot, not in it. But in his final years at United, Ferguson dropped him to the base, and something happened that belongs in this conversation. A player with average athleticism and a famously catastrophic tackle success rate controlled matches from deep better than almost anyone in Premier League history. Purely through spatial understanding, where to stand so the ball came to him, when to release it so the press never arrived, how to make a chaotic midfield feel ordered. Scholes proved the role could be solved through pure football intelligence alone, even when everything else was missing. If that argument doesn't convince you, fair enough. But the fact that Xavi, Iniesta and Guardiola all named him the best midfielder of his generation should at least make you think about why 3 architects of the greatest possession system ever built pointed at the one man who never truly fit the position. Sergio Busquets. If Pirlo proved the role could be about vision, and Scholes proved it could be about reinvention, Busquets proved it could be about total control. Guardiola's Barcelona needed one thing above all: a player who could receive the ball under the most intense pressing in world football, resist it, and play the pass that initiated the attack. Busquets delivered that with a consistency that bordered on mechanical. 9 La Liga titles, 3 Champions Leagues, a World Cup and a European Championship where Spain's possession system needed Busquets the way it needed Xavi and Iniesta. Every major club spent the following decade trying to find their own version. Almost none succeeded. He didn't redefine one dimension of defensive midfield play. He set the standard for all of it. From the wrong men deployed out of position to the blueprints who redefined the role entirely. Comment your 3 level 7 players below and let me know where I got it wrong.